بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
آله وصحبه أجمعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ضرب الله مثلا للذين آمنوا امرأة فرعون إذ قالت رب ابن لي عندك بيتا في الجنة ونجني من فرعون وعمله ونجني من القوم الظالمين صدق الله العظيم. Alhamdulillah, brothers and sisters, we're continuing with these reflections from the Quran Kareem. And as we mentioned previously, Allah Azza wa Jal in the Quran has mentioned the biographies and the stories of the prophets, and also those righteous and pious individuals who either lived in the time of the prophets or they were people of great faith and great tribulation and struggle for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, along with mentioning the prophets alayhimus salatu wassalam, Allah mentions some of these righteous individuals as well. And being mentioned in the Quran is not a small matter. The fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is honoring them, that their names, some of them are mentioned, and the mention of others are commemorated in this Quran. This is something which, it being in the eternal word and kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is an immense bounty and it's an immense honor. And another thing is, when we read their stories, it becomes even part of our worship. That when we are reciting the stories of these individuals and we are reciting the incidents of these special people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us reward through their names that are being mentioned. So with that being said, alhamdulillah, that usually every Ramadan, these Ramadan lectures that we have, they are collected like almost like a booklet and notes, that those of you who attended, inshallah, hopefully by near the later on this week, the entire lecture written out will be published, and we'll be having it inshallah. So anybody who would like to actually have the booklet form of these lectures that are being mentioned, like in note form, basically you can go through from Adam alayhi salam to Idris alayhi salam to Shuaib to Musa to all the Anbiya alayhi salam that we mentioned. You can see kind of like the notes and the biographies very briefly. Well, obviously it's not going to be the entire lecture, but you get like the brief overview of the lives of these prophets and pious people that we've mentioned. So with that being said, the individual and the personality that we want to speak about tonight is Asiyah bint Muzahim. Asiyah bint Muzahim. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he mentions in a hadith, the khayru nisa'il alameen arba'a, that the greatest women of the world are four individuals. He said Asiyah bint Muzahim, and Maryam bint Imran, and Khadija bint Khuwaylid, and Fatima bint Muhammad alayhi salatu wassalam. He said khayru nisa'il alameen. These are the greatest women of all the worlds in their piety and in their righteousness and in their example. One of them is Asiyah bint Muzahim, who you can say was like a mother to Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam. And even though she was the wife of Fir'aun, she was somebody that with great love, and as we mentioned last night, what did she say? La taqtuluhu, right? La taqtuluhu, right? Asa an yanfa'ana aw nattakhidhahu walada. Don't kill him, oh my husband. Asa an yanfa'ana. Perhaps this boy will benefit us. And her asa became, right, muhaqqaq. Her asa became muhaqqaq. It became qad nafa'aha, right? She said, perhaps this boy will benefit us. Indeed, the boy benefited them. It benefited her, right? أَوْ نَتَّخِذَهُ وَلَدًا. We take this boy as our own son. We adopt him. So we mentioned her story, that when she saw Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam as a child, with great eagerness and great hope, she adopted this boy with a lot of, you can say, eagerness and with a lot of hope. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then, to that hope and that love that she had for Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam, Allah blessed her with iman. Fast forward many years later, when Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam, he came out as a Nabi, and he came out as a prophet. So many people, right, they were tested by this. From the people of Fir'aun, they say only a few accepted Islam. A majority of them, they perished in the punishment of Allah and they were drowned. But a few of them accepted. One was Rajulun min Ali Fir'aun, who we already spoke about his story. That the surah of Suratul Ghafir, it's either called Suratul Ghafir or Suratul Mu'min. Both names are given to that surah. Either Suratul Ghafir, and the other name that is given to the surah is Suratul Mu'min, which is another possibility that the Mufassirin mentioned, the surah of the believer. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honored him that he was a believer. So he was one of those who, by Allah's grace, accepted Islam and accepted Musa alayhi salam. And the second one from the people of Fir'aun was the wife of Fir'aun herself, actually. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Surah Al-Tahrim, ayat number 11, Allah Azza wa Jal actually mentions, وَضَرَبَ اللَّهُ مَثَلًا لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. Allah gives an example. Do you want to see a beautiful example of those who believe? And you can imagine, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us role models. This ayah where it says, ضَرَبَ اللَّهُ مَثَلًا لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, that if you want to take someone, الَّذِي يَتَمَثَّلُ الْإِيمَانَ الْكَامِلِ, somebody who represents and personifies true faith. Look at Sayyidatina Asiyah bint Muzahim, who the Prophet ﷺ said, أَفْضَلُ نِسَاءِ الْعَالَمِينَ, the most virtuous of the women of the world. Number one, Asiyah bint Muzahim. Number two, Maryam bint Imran, the mother of Jesus, peace be upon her. Number three, Khadija bint Khuwaylid, the beloved wife of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, Ummul Mu'mineen. And lastly, Fatima bint Muhammad alayhi salatu wassalam wa alayha salam. So these are the four. And from amongst them was Sayyidah Asiyah. And what she symbolized. And we see, like all the stories that we've been talking about, brothers and sisters, basically it's all the same, isn't it? You have some patience that they're exhibiting. There's some hardship that is coming their way. There is overwhelming odds that they are surrounded by, right? This is all basically the same, but in different angles. One is being tested, for example, by his people. Another is being tested, for example, by his wife. Another is being tested by his son. Another is being tested by the father. Another is being tested by the husband. And this kind of shows us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, every scenario of struggle and every scenario of trial and tribulation, Allah has mentioned in the Quran. If it's being tested by your own spouse, that is mentioned. If it's being tested by your father, Ibrahim alayhi salam's story. If it's being tested by your clan and by your people, Sayyidina Lut and Shu'aib and Hud and all of those other Anbiya alayhimus salam, they are an example. If it's being tested by your wife, Sayyidina Lut alayhi salam and Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam, that their wives literally betrayed them. If it's being your husband, it's Sayyidatina Asiyah radiyallahu anha. So their stories, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, every single scenario of trial and tribulation, He has mentioned in the Quran. If it's being tested with sickness, remember we talked about sickness and being tried in your own physical body through physical illness. It was Sayyidina Ayyub alayhi salam, who suffered from a sickness that people didn't even want him to be close to the city. They exiled him from the city, right? So every single, different scenario of tribulation in the human condition, we can find in the stories of the Anbiya or the Awliya that are mentioned in the Quran Kareem. For what? So that we take solace in their stories. We get inspired by their stories. We become motivated by their stories. And here so many, subhanallah, so many stories we hear about wives that are suffering at the hands of, abusive husbands. Or husbands that are, forgotten, or husbands that are, for example, neglected, or husbands that are cheated, or husbands that are betrayed by their own wives. In this, Subhanallah, Allah Azza wa Jal as an example of both. And Allah mentions, ضَرَبَ اللَّهُ مَثَلًا لِلَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. If you read the last page of Surah At-Tahrim, ضَرَبَ اللَّهُ مَثَلًا لِلَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا امْرَأَةَ نُوحٍ وَامْرَأَةَ لُوطٍ. If you see the example, Allah is saying, Allah is giving an example of those who disbelieved, those who betrayed. امْرَأَةُ نُوحٍ وَامْرَأَةُ لُوطٍ. The wife of Noah and the wife of Lut. They betrayed. كانتا تحت عبدين من عبادنا صالحين فخانتاهما. They were in the marriage of two righteous slaves of mine. فخانتاهما. And they betrayed them. Meaning the wives, despite the fact that they were married to such righteous individuals, they were married to prophets, but those wives betrayed their husbands. What is in this? My dear brothers and sisters, there's a solace in this. That a person can be shattered. Imagine that you become betrayed by your own life partner. You become shattered to pieces. You don't want to live anymore. You have no hope to live, but Allah gives us hope. That look, Sayyidina Lut alayhi salam was tested by this. Right? Don't allow this to make you lose hope. We've commemorated them, we've honored them, and they went through this difficulty. It was probably worse than your difficulty. Why? Because they were prophets, they needed more support than you do. Nobody needs more support than a prophet of Allah that has been given mission of guiding humanity, given the responsibility and the burden of guiding humanity. Your responsibilities cannot be more than the responsibilities of a prophet. But they were betrayed. So if they were betrayed and they had patience, then you can have patience. Look at their stories and allow their stories to inspire you. It's not the end of the world. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will test us. And this is what in another verse of the Quran Allah Ta'ala says, وَجَعَلْنَا بَعْضُكُمْ لِبَعْضٍ فِتْنَةً وَجَعَلْنَا بَعْضُكُمْ لِبَعْضٍ فِتْنَةً أَتَصْبِرُونَ وَكَانَ رَبُّكَ بَصِيرًا. And we made one of you as a tribulation for the other. أَتَصْبِرُونَ. Why? Why did we make one a tribulation for another? Will you have patience? We put you in these scenarios. Father is being tested by son, son is being tested by father, husband being tested by wife, wife is being tested by husband, community is being tested by the people, people are being tested by the, So we have all of these various scenarios. Why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala do this? وَجَعَلْنَا بَعْضُكُمْ لِبَعْضٍ فِتْنَةً. We made you a test for one another. But what should you do? Kill somebody? Or humiliate somebody? Or abandon somebody, or betray somebody? No. Tolerate patience and hope for the reward. When you're making mu'amala with those people, either be patient or either have shukr. Not to retaliate, not to do something that is outside the boundaries and the limitations of the sharia when you're making mu'amala with someone else. So Allah Azza wa Jal, these individuals symbolized. ضَرَبَ اللَّهُ مَثَلًا لِلَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا وَضَرَبَ اللَّهُ مَثَلًا لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. Allah is giving us an example of those who disbelieved, the wife of Lut and the wife of Nuh. كَانَتَا تَحْتَ عَبْدَيْنِ مِنْ عِبَادِنَا صَالِحَيْنِ. They were in the marriage of two righteous prophets of mine. فَخَانَتَاهُمَا. But those wives betrayed their husbands. فَلَمْ يُغْنِيَا عَنْهُمَا مِنَ اللَّهِ شَيْئًا. Them being a prophet, them being the spouse and the wife of the prophet did not benefit them in any way. وَقِيلَ ادْخُلَ النَّارَ مَعَ الدَّاخِلِينَ. And it will be said to them, enter into the fire with those who are going inside the fire. You being even the wife of a prophet will not benefit you on the day of judgment. وَضَرَبَ اللَّهُ مَثَلًا لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا امْرَأَةَ فِرْعَوْنَ. And Allah gives us an example of a believing woman. امْرَأَةُ فِرْعَوْنَ. Can you imagine? Just even that gives you goosebumps. The wife of Fir'aun. When you just hear the wife of Fir'aun, you're probably thinking, oh my God, maybe she's like Fir'aun as well. Actually, the exact opposite. She was the embodiment of mercy. She was the embodiment of compassion. She was the embodiment of faith. She was the embodiment of everything that was good. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had put her in that predicament. And this teaches us such an important thing, brothers and sisters, that we never judge anyone. That somebody is in a particular situation, we don't automatically say that, okay, that person is also going to go to hell. That person is hellbound. Every person, the husband is going to go in his grave, wife is going to go in her grave. The father is going to go and he has his account to give before Allah. Son will have his account to give to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everybody is going to be responsible for their own hisab and kitab. Yes, there is a connection and relationship, but this is a beautiful example of her being steadfast in the face of overwhelming odds. And even her husband being the greatest tyrant on the face of this earth, it did not affect her. It did not allow her to, right, to change her mind and her decision that the deen of her, Musa alayhi salam, is haqq. And the Mufassirin mentioned, subhanallah, the Mufassirin, they mentioned, and I wanted to read from the tafsir of Qurtubi, Abu al-Aliyah, the Tabi'i, who was also a Mufassir of the Quran. He says, اطلع فرعون على إيمان امرأته. Fir'aun found out about the iman of his wife. And it's very interesting. It says that when she was, the maid of the daughter of Fir'aun, when she was combing her hair or something, the comb fell out of her hand, and she said, Bismillah. So he said, what, are you a believer? What is it that you... So she started to speak to Sayyidah Asiyah about who is Allah. And slowly, Iman started to enter into her heart, because she knew Musa is like her own son. But slowly through this da'wah, Iman started to enter into her heart. And that is why, brothers and sisters, don't ever underestimate these small conversations that we have. I know, mashallah, Uber drivers that have converted more people than you can imagine. Wallahi. Uber drivers and taxi drivers that they have converted more people to Islam than you can even imagine. How? Just by the small conversations. And this is the story that Mufassiri mentioned. Ibn Kathir rahmatullahi is mentioning. Right? That the maid of the house of Fir'aun, the maid, the worker, something fell from her hand and she says, oh, Bismillah. Huh? What is this that you just said? What is Bismillah? What is Allah? Who is Allah? وَمَا رَبُّ الْعَالَمِينَ. He said, oh, this, and slowly. And you don't know, these small seeds you are planting in the hearts of people. And this is slowly, because Asiyah radiallahu anha, may Allah be pleased with her, she had done an immense amount of kindness to Musa alayhi salam. She had already immense love for him. She had already taken care of him and brought him up. And that, like you can say that the land was fertile for the seed of Iman to be planted. And slowly it started that she eventually became to believe. Long story short, Fir'aun found out about this. وَاطَّلَعَ فِرْعَوْنُ عَلَى إِيمَانِ امْرَأَتِهِ. He found out about the iman of his wife. فَخَرَجَ عَلَى الْمَلَأِ. So you understand what is the level of the evil of this tyrant. He came out to his darbar, his court, and he said, مَا تَعْلَمُونَ مِنْ آسِيَ بِنْتِ مُزَاحِمٍ. What do you all know about Asiyah bint Muzahim, my wife? What do you all say about her? What do you all know about her? So they said, فَأَثْنَوْا عَلَيْهَا. They started to praise her. She's such a wonderful woman, such a good woman. So Fir'aun said to them, إِنَّهَا تَعْبُدُ رَبًّا غَيْرِي. Do you know that she worships a Lord besides me? فَقَالُوا. So they said, oh, is that the case? Then kill her. فَاقْتُلْهَا. Then put her to death, execute her. فَأَوْتَدَ لَهَا أَوْتَادًا وَشَدَّ يَدَيْهَا وَرِجْلَيْهَا. So we know that what was Fir'aun called? وَفِرْعَوْنَ ذِي الْأَوْتَادِ. And Fir'aun, the man of the pegs. So she put the pegs and she would put them out in the sun. She would put these pegs and stretching them out in the heat of the Egyptian sun. You can imagine. فَأَوْتَدَ لَهَا أَوْتَادًا وَشَدَّ يَدَيْهَا وَرِجْلَيْهَا. And it was at that moment where she is being persecuted in the sun and persecuted in this manner. She made this dua, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah Al-Tahrim, رَبِّ بِنِ لِي عِنْدَكَ بَيْتًا فِي الْجَنَّةِ. Oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, make me a house close to you in Jannah. وَنَجِّنِي مِنْ فِرْعَوْنَ وَعَمَلِهِ وَنَجِّنِي مِنَ الْقَوْمِ الظَّالِمِينَ. And O Allah, save me from Fir'aun and his evil, and save me from the, right, zalim peoples. وَوَافَقَ ذَلِكَ حُضُورُ فِرْعَوْنَ. And while she was making this dua and Allah granted her, and she was seeing her place in Jannah, she was smiling and laughing. So Fir'aun would say, أَلَا تَعْجَبُونَ مِن جُنُونِهَا. Are you not amazed and astonished by the madness of this woman? We are torturing her in the sun and she is laughing. إِنَّا نُعَذِّبُهَا وَهِيَ تَضْحَكُ فَقُبِضَ رُوحُهَا. And there Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took her soul in that state when she was being punished and she was being tortured by Fir'aun. Just like the many other Muslims and the many other pious people who was being tortured. And from her story, this is the thing that we see. In some of the riwayat it mentions, they're not strong riwayat, but it mentions that Sayyida Asiyah bint Muzahim will be married to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam in Jannah. Imagine that because of the patience that she had in the life of this world with such a tyrant, and she had patience upon it, and she died with Iman, and she sacrificed her life for the sake of Iman, and she became martyred for the truth and martyred for Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give her baytan fil Jannah, insha'Allah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will put her in the company of the most righteous and pious. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be pleased with her. So as we see, in every single situation, whether a husband is being tested by the wife or a wife is being tested by the husband, all of the examples of the human condition is in the Quran for us to take heed and for us to take inspiration. May Allah give us tawfiq to understand and implement what has been said. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.